Hey, welcome back to Lick of the Week videos. This is part 3 in our chromatic series. We're looking at how bluegrass players may use chromatic intervals to make licks and spice up their playing. We looked at the first few frets in the last video and looked at some commonly occurring and repeatable fingering positions for the left hand, which is really important to know as a banjo player. You're always going to find repeatable patterns in whatever style you play, be it single string, melodic, or scruggs. There will be repeatable patterns for your right and your left hand that will help you reproduce notes in different keys and different locations without a lot of effort. It's all about conservation of motion, if you want to think of it that way. So let's start above, say, the 12th fret. I want to use my G chord since we've been looking at G as an example. Let's explore some G chromatic ideas, G chromatic scales that we can play, and I always like to have a reference point, so I'm going to use this G chord as my reference point. The only nearby root note that I have is this G, which is the 8th fret of the 2nd string, which is the root note out of this G chord. So I'm going to use the zoom feature here again, hopefully, and let's look at some different ways. I'm going to start with this root note, G, which is the 2nd string. Now this is going to limit me in what I can string together, because starting on a small string down here, down being this direction, as opposed to on this side of the fingerboard, means that I'm going to run out of notes to jump over to, or strings, in other words, to jump over to. So let me see what I can do. I know I don't have 3 or 4 strings below this to play, so I'll just have to see what I can do with these 2 strings. G, G sharp, A. Now here's that repeatable pattern that I mentioned in the previous video. G sharp slash, A sharp slash B flat. Thumb or the middle catches this B note, and now I can introduce the pinky if I like. So if I wanted to start on a G note and maybe end on a C note, that could be a chromatic lick unto itself that helps me get to a C chord. But if I wanted to continue up and resolve this to another G note, and I decide to use the pinky, 10th fret of the 1st string is a C note. When I shift this position, which you normally will as a melodic player, you have to be conscious of not repeating any notes, because you want to go from one note to the next, half step apart each time. So by introducing the pinky, that's going to change which note on which string I'm going to play next. C, C sharp will be the 5th string, so I need to make sure that if I put the pinky down in this position, that when I shift up, now the thumb will be the next note. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D will now be my pinky. So you wouldn't think that adding something as simple as your pinky on one fret would change things that much, but it does. It changes the flow of the notes, because if I want to stay purely chromatic, starting on a G and ending on a G, that means that I have to be conscious of what note is being played on what finger. And in the beginning, until you get the sounds of these chromatic intervals in your mind and in your ear, it's a good idea to call out the notes so that you know you're not doubling anything. G, G sharp, A, B flat, C, if I'm going to, B, sorry, C, C sharp, D. Now that means by using the pinky that I've short-circuited this position slightly. I didn't use this note and I didn't use this note. So again, that takes a little bit of logic on your part to think, okay, what's the reason for using this pinky? Would I have been better off not to use the pinky? You know, well, the same thing could happen. If you notice, when I shifted this position up, even though the fingering looks exactly the same, I wound up with 2 repeating B notes, which is not what I wanted to do. I wanted to stay chromatic the whole way. So even though I didn't use the pinky on the 1st string and I shifted the position up, I have to watch out for which note I play next. I do not want to play this note, because that's the same note I played here with my thumb. B, 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 same note. So now I'm going to have to go to the first string, and then this, and then shift up again. So what will happen is it gets kind of confusing at first until you figure out what notes you need next. So again, try to call the notes out. Now, playing the G is the root on the second string is an option. I could have gone all the way up to the 12th fret and played a G there. Okay, G, that would mean G sharp would be on the second string. That's a jumping off point at 9. So I have G, G sharp, and then A would have to be here again. A sharp, B. So I'm going to wind up, even though I started on the third string, I'm going to wind up eventually on the first string if I want to do this without a lot of work. Or I could have repeated this position. G, G sharp, A will be now here. I've just shifted the position up. A sharp. If I keep going up the neck, you'll run out of the camera shot. But what happens is it's taking me farther and farther up the neck, and I'm staying on the same two strings, which again works, but it's just like the patterns we use down here. Eventually you're going to get tired probably of continually reusing the same position, and it's making you go up the neck. It's forcing you to do that. So if you want to stay in this location and play chromatic intervals that relate to, say, G, try to locate a G chord and then string together those intervals and try to stay as much as you can in this area. It's really good practice to stay in one spot. Now, if I wanted to start on a note other than a G note, how would that work? Well, remember, when you're playing any ideas over a G chord, say rhythm, rest of the band's playing a G chord, and you want to play some interesting chromatic ideas over that G chord, you don't have to start with a G, and you don't necessarily have to even end on a G, but even though it's really nice to resolve your ideas, because the rest of the band is providing you that foundation. They're giving you that planet which you can orbit. G is the planet, if you want to think like space talk, and moons that revolve around the planet would be your scale notes or the in-between notes that you skipped over to play the G scale. So when you think about a G scale in particular, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, you skipped over G to A, you skipped over a G sharp note, G, A, B, C, you skip over a C sharp to get to D, E, you skip over F to get to F sharp, G. So the chromatic notes that you need to tie in with the G scale are just the notes that you skipped over. So when you play a normal G scale, the notes that you skipped over are the chromatic notes you need to plug back in to get your chromatic scale. So it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle with some pieces missing, and the pieces that you need are right there in front of you. So that means that I can put together some notes that are scale based, like here's B and the D, which are scale notes for G. Then let's say the B string open fifth, and then maybe if I want to make this bluesy, I could go to an F note, F sharp, G. Now if I string this together, then you start to hear something that sounds major sounding, and then bluesy because of this F note, and then I could go chromatic again, and then I could resolve it back to the G note, the open fifth. What if I want to start on some different scale notes? Here's an E and an F sharp, open fifth. Alright, those are scale notes. They're not chromatic. G scale notes. And again, you notice that I'm staying close to this G chord, even though this is melodic style. Now I'm going to go over here to my A and my B. Okay, those would be chromatic G scale ideas, but to go chromatic again, all I have to do is think about the notes that I'm leaving out normally. just a hint of that chromaticism. Gives you some pretty cool sounds. I'm not playing but just one chromatic interval, but it's pretty effective. I can take it farther if I like. And it all goes back to, what do you think is tasteful? Do you think that's tasteful? Do you think it's too much? Only you can determine that, or the people you're playing with. But we're trying to string together chromatic ideas that sound like they're functioning in and around a G chord. Some of it will be scale based, some of it will be purely chromatic. Some of it will be bluesy. So those will give you some ideas to chew on, but it's a good idea, like I said, I hate to be redundant, but try to focus on a tonal center. If you're practicing chromatic intervals, it's really easy to get lost in them because they're all a bunch of notes that are half step apart, and if you play them long enough without centering them on something or having something to hook them on to revolve around, like a note, like a G note, then they just sound like random notes that don't really mean anything and you don't add anything to the music you're trying to play. So use your G chord here as a reference point for the middle of the neck. You can try mixing in melodic scale fragments that you already know that are scale based, and then try going chromatic by just introducing 1 or 2 or 3 notes. It's up to you where you want to slip those notes in. So I could have G, A, B, C, D as a starting point. And then I could go chromatic. So it's really up to you. I mean, it's really cool. Some of the ideas will sound great. Some will kind of be like, I don't know about that. But that's the cool thing about these intervals, is it's really up to you to make the listener decide where it's going. You determine where these ideas are going. So for the rest of this video, I'll just kind of goof off and have fun with this. Next video, maybe we'll move up the neck a little further and explore some more positions and some more patterns. I appreciate it. See you next time.